Because her heart is constantly working on replacing, well, not replacing, but,
They have a tolerance?
Y'all are all really, really, really close, but you're not quite there. Think about cardiovascular exercise. What does it do for your heart? Makes it good and strong, right? So that means that if you got a super strong heart, you're gonna have a super hard squeeze, right? And you're gonna get more blood out into circulation than someone whose heart is not as strong. Well, if you're putting more blood out, what does that do to the blood coming back? You have more returning, don't you? Because remember, it's a closed system. You're pushing it through all the way. So the more you push out, the more comes back. Well, the heart is stretchy. The more that it fills up, the better it's able to contract. Oh, so they're efficient. It might, Michael Phelps' heart can probably accomplish in 1 beat what mine can do in 5. You see what I mean? It has to do with efficiency and how much is pushed through to refill the next filler. Very good, very good. Tachycardia, this is abnormally high, greater than 100. Greater than 100. What's that gonna feel like? Everybody look at Lene. That was the best. That was the best. She was like, and that's right. You're gonna feel nervous. You're gonna feel anxious. Probably gonna have a headache, and you're gonna feel very, very out of sorts. Very out of sorts. And of course, stress, pregnancy, which is the definition of stress, and it stays that way for 25 years. But you get the idea. Tachycardia, excessively high. So now let's go back to our target rate. So usually it's between 120 to 160. And back to the question of what happens if we exceed our target heart rate for any length of time. Think about it. Don't say it just yet. Think about what happens to your cardiac output.
You can't keep up.
Explain.
Well, it's just pumping the heart through at such a high rate that it's not able to circulate as quickly as it would.
Getting there. Erica, what were you gonna say, Erica?
Does the AE know?
No, it doesn't really have anything to do with the SA or the AB. What are you gonna say, Ashley? Yeah, it's going, but remember, what you pump out determines what comes back in. If you're squeezing it out and you're contracting like this, there's no time for it to get back in and fill up. So you don't get an efficient squeeze. Yeah.
So is that how, like, sometimes, so for example, like, there'll be an instance where, like, I'm going to work out and I've been on the treadmill and it's like the machine wants to slow down because my heart rate has gone well past 160, but my extremities will start to feel tight, like almost like it's kind of holding fluid, so to say.
Yeah.
Would that have anything to do with like the fact that it's not able to keep up and pump everything back up?
Yes.
And I'll usually feel it like in my hands.
Yes, and it's because if you're not pumping efficiently, you're not getting a fresh supply of oxygen for those cells to get more energy. Yeah, that's how.
So that's opposite from when you're sitting too long and swell up?
Yeah, because when you're sitting too long, it's similar. When you're sitting too long, you have tissue perfusion, but it's harder for you to circulate when you're sitting still. Stand up and get your heart pumping, and that'll help move that fluid back into circulation and out of that tissue. Good question. Good question. It all fits together. It all fits together, and that's why, if you've got a patient, and I know, in various things, I'll say, I'm really not feeling good. Check your heart rate. As long as your heart rate's in the norm, you're probably okay. But if you start getting up in the 120s, just sitting there, and it's ratcheting up, you've got a problem, and you need to figure out what it is. You see, so you gotta maintain the target. So we know why stroke volume decreases as heart rate rises. Tell me, in terms of systole and diastole, what is happening when the heart rate is excessive? Just think about it for a second. Kind of have have this mental picture of what's happening to the cardiac output, but what's happening to your systolic and diastolic values. What do you think?
It's contracting more than adjusting.
Yeah, you're not getting enough time to rest. So what are your blood pressure numbers gonna look like in that case?
High,
They're gonna be high, but what's normal blood pressure?
120 over 80.
120 over 80, sometimes they want 110 over 70. You got a situation, who's in a more dangerous situation? The patient who is 160 over 80, or the patient who is 160 over 110?
160 over 110.
160 over 110. As those numbers start to get closer together, that's when you're not relaxing, and you've got a heart that's really going overtime, but not circulating blood efficiently. Not that but, alright. Are we okay with the, nervous system? So even though you have the autorhythmic cells, the self-excitable cells, the pacemaker cells, the nervous system still plays a role, particularly if it's accelerating or decelerating the heart rate. So there is autonomic tone with the medulla oblongata that is constantly reinforcing those pacemaker cells, if you will. Think of it like that. And of course, you have a cardiac plexus, which is near the base of the heart. Is that top or bottom? The base is the top, good. So you have nerve fibers there that can affect heart rate. Norepinephrine, epinephrine. Will that increase or decrease the heart rate? It will increase. It will increase. Where does norepinephrine and epinephrine come from? Good. The adrenal medulla. What part of the nervous system is it associated with? Sympathetic. Should we have a quiz? I was just gonna activate your sympathetic nervous system. I'm an ass. I know I am, y'all. I am. All right. So knowing that we have this epinephrine, norepinephrine, what have you, look, those are binding to a beta receptor. Remember beta adrenergic receptors from last semester? Even if you don't, you know what a beta blocker does, right? What does a beta blocker do? Well, think about it. If norepinephrine and epinephrine binds to a beta receptor, and you block that receptor, so there is no NE or E, what happens? It slows down. It slows down. So a beta blocker is gonna slow the heart rate. So that's why.
Is that like if you had a allergic reaction, what they would use to kind of get it to suppress itself?
Yeah. People with high blood pressure often take beta blockers too. And it's often an additive in high blood pressure medicine. Very good, very good. Alright, that's really it. I wouldn't stress too much about the nervous stuff. Just know that you do have sympathetic fibers that can accelerate or decelerate the heart, depending upon. But the majority of the rhythm is controlled by those pacemaker cells. Alright, are we okay with this? I mean, that's kind of the long and short. It's nothing that really merits a ton of explanation, but just understand that it's not the pacemaker cells alone. You have some nervous system input as well that can override that depending upon what's going on. And I would definitely know what a beta blocker does. Alright? Okay. Think of it as, if this looks big and complicated, but it's really not. Let's see if we can make it easy. So when we talk about the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, the analogy that I like to give people is driving with one foot on the brake. We look at things in a vacuum and we think, well, the nervous system's not doing anything for me because I have all these self-pacing cells that do it. But there's more to it than that. The nervous system helps maintain those steady rates and so forth. So when you're at rest, your parasympathetic nervous system is on autopilot. It doesn't mean that your sympathetic isn't there and that you don't have any epinephrine. It just means that you don't have a lot. Does that make sense? So then when the sympathetic kicks in, it overrides the parasympathetic. You still have the same kind of baseline, it's just that you've overridden it temporarily. And basically what that means in terms of conduction is what? So if you have a situation where the sympathetic nervous system is activated, what chemicals are we talking about? Epinephrine, norepinephrine, and those are going to bind to the beta receptors from a conduction standpoint. What will that do to your pacemaker cells? They'll fire faster, and so if we go all the way to the cellular level, what are those chemicals actually doing to those cells? Yeah, and making the channels open. That's all it is. You're depolarizing faster, then you're getting the threshold faster than you would otherwise. So how do you stop that? You block the receptor, or you close the channels, or you have a response that maybe doesn't keep those channels open anymore, so that you have your slow threshold again. Make sense? Okay, cool. Okay, and again, all this looks more complicated than it really is. Baroreceptors, you need to know. Chemoreceptors, what might those respond to? Like hormones, oxygen concentration, carbon dioxide concentration, pH is a big one. What about the limbic system? Y'all remember this. What does the limbic system control? This is emotional response. That can affect your heart rate, can't it? Absolutely it can. So all of these things play a role in the heart rate and what have you. Baroreceptors, this is just the same kind of thing that we saw a second ago. I would make sure that you look at one of these flowcharts so that you understand what happens when there's an increase in pressure versus what happens when the pressure is decreased. So things like vasodilation, heart rate slower, inhibiting the centers of the brain and what have you. Okay? Alright. Notice that there are receptors in the aorta, also in the vena cava, the pulmonary vessels, and ironically, the right side of the heart. Why would you have more baroreceptors on the right side than the left? Say what? Actually, you first.
Pressure,
What about it?
it should be lower.
Good. Is that what you guys all said too? What'd you say, Tiffany? You may not have been wrong, but it is because the pressure on the right side is supposed to be low. Why is it low on the right side? It has less distance to go. What's returning from systemic circulation is going super slow. I mean, you've already had your big push out with the left ventricle. What's returning is going very, very slow, and it's a low pressure circuit to the pulmonary. So it's a very good place to monitor pressure. I'll ask that in a second. The atrial reflex is when you have increased blood flow to the atria, that will cause stretches in the atrial wall to accommodate for that excessive pressure. Under what circumstance would you expect someone to have damage to the right side of the heart? In other words, can you imagine a situation that would put too much pressure on the right side? No. Think of a disorder. Say it again. Well, yeah, paralysis will definitely cause something
Would
like
high
that.
blood pressure?
High blood pressure could, especially if it's extensive, yeah. What else might?
Obesity?
That can, but usually that's gonna be congestive over the whole thing.
Okay.
What if you have pulmonary emboli?
Could you repeat that?
What type of situation would lead to damage to the right side?
And you said pulmonary.
Pulmonary emboli. What's a pulmonary embolus? It's a clot that's moved and it lodges in the lungs. So think about it. It starts as a DVT, right? Usually in a leg, and it returns up through venous circulation and goes where? To the right side of the heart. And then it goes out to where? Right into the lungs. Well, why would that cause right side damage? clogs up the works. Now the right side's having to work 10 times as hard because there's something in the way. There's resistance. So it's a very good monitor of pressure. Very good, very good. All right, we mentioned chemoreceptors, we mentioned the limbic system. Did y'all know that this is really a thing? Broken heart syndrome. It actually does happen, particularly with elderly people who lose a spouse. It's usually the result of, some big, major stressful event. And it can be grief or fear or whatever. It causes the stress hormones to get released. So now you've got an accelerated heart rate. You accelerate to the point that you lower the ability to pump, you lower your output, right? Just like we talked about with the athletes. And eventually you get chest pain and symptoms that are like a heart attack, and it can be fatal. I know, I've got to use my husband's example again. Had a situation where, and I think it was an older gentleman had called, his wife had called 911 to come take him to the hospital because he had whatever issue. Well, he died en route, and the son went home to pick up his mother and found her dead in the floor. It was like, are you kidding me? But it really is a thing. It can cause weakening of the myocardium and lead to lethal rhythms, lack of output, circulatory shock. Crazy stuff. All right, so this is just a table that shows you kind of what certain hormones and certain things can do. I don't expect you to memorize this. Most of this is pretty self-explanatory. So I might ask you a question like, which of the following would increase heart rate? And I might have, emotional upheaval, too much caffeine, anything like that, but it's gonna be the stuff that you know. I'm not gonna ask you to tell me the effect of, something off the wall, some off the wall pharmaceutical, All right, so that's that. Now, why don't y'all take another quick, like a 3-minute stretch, and we'll talk a little more physiology. So let's look at factors that affect stroke volume. All right, and so we've got some repeated information here. We'll make this as short and sweet as we can. We're looking at 3 things. All right, 3 things: preload, contractility, and afterload. And so basically, this section is the last part. Hooray! And it shows you how these factors can increase or decrease your amount of blood that you're pumping out. And there's a reason that I have this kid here with this slingshot, because preload has to do with Starling's law. Preload is defined as, it's kind of like another way to express the end diastolic volume. In other words, how much is in the ventricles at their maximum filling. How much is in the ventricles at max filling? And that would be your end diastolic volume, right? Diastole means rest. So that means they have rested, and they are completely full. That is preload. Well, this is important because we know that the force generated by a muscle fiber is proportional to its initial length. What the hell does that mean in freaking English? Here's what it means. It means that cardiac muscle cells are stretching. And so you've got a certain point where the stretch in the fiber is going to increase the push, like a piece of elastic. Does that make sense? So the more preload you have, tell me what that's gonna do to your stretch and your push. It's gonna increase it. So without that, without the return to the heart, the efficient return, then your Starling's law, Starling is not happy because you're not getting enough in the ventricles to give the extra push. This picture kind of demonstrates this. So here is your normal end diastolic volume. Here's your normal heart. All right, and our stroke volume is up here, just like it's supposed to be. So what do we got here in purple? Well, our heart is failing, but our sympathetic nervous system is compensating for it. So maybe our pacemaker cells are not doing well, or the muscle cells themselves are having a hard time, but the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, gets the epinephrine in there, and helps us along. So we're compensated here, so our normal stroke volume is slightly lower, but not tremendously so. But then what's happening here in the red? You don't have your sympathetic stimulation, so your your end diastolic volume is much, much lower. You see that? Because you're not able to push the blood around until it refills. All right. Contractility is similar. Contractility has to do with the force of the contraction. So good, strong muscles, good, strong force, that ultimately controls your stroke volume, but also your ESV. What is ESV? It's your end systolic volume. So after the squeeze. So the better the contractility, the higher or lower the ESV.
Oh, lower.
The lower the ESV. Do you see the difference? The higher the contractility, the stronger the contractility.
That like the contraction.
The strength of contraction. The higher or lower in systolic volume. Lower, because that's what you're left with after the squeeze. So an increase in contractility, higher or lower stroke volume. Higher stroke volume, because that's what you're sending out. You see what I'm doing here? I'm just looking at each term in terms of this particular feature. Okay? There are things that can increase or decrease contractility depending upon our needs. A positive inotrope is going to increase. A negative inotrope is going to decrease. Under what circumstance would you ever want to decrease contractility? If you have high blood pressure or an accelerated heart rate for whatever reason. So it makes sense that if you're looking at a decrease in, or let's say increase in contractility, sympathetic nervous system, that's gonna make it get going, isn't it? Yeah. Catecholamines, increased heart rate is gonna increase contractility and increase in afterload. So that's what that's about. Contractility, strength of contraction. And what was preload?
The force that it's capable of, or like as much as,
It's how much it's holding.
how much it's more.
It's how much it's holding. It's a volume. Think of preload as a volume. You want the ventricles maxed out so that you stretch those fibers and give them a more chance to refill. All right? Positive inotropes are things like dopamine. They increase the calcium influx. Why would an increase in calcium entering cells cause more contractility or stronger contractions?
You create more energy with the channel segment.
Yeah, you're basically forcing the
I
depolarization.
don't know where that came from.
But you are, you're opening the channels, you're letting the calcium come in, you're reaching threshold faster, essentially. Negative agents, things like hypoxia. What's hypoxia?
Loss of oxygen.
Lack of oxygen. Good, Jesse. So lack of oxygen is gonna affect contractility. Why?
Because it's not gonna go through or pump the blood.
Why? You're right, but why? You're not feeding the heart, but what is the heart not doing if it's not getting oxygen? Cell respiration, people.
Pumping.
It's not getting ATP because you don't have any oxygen to make the cell respiration work, right? So that's what it is, yeah, hypoxia, acidosis. What is hyperkalemia? That's excess potassium. Excess potassium. And what does potassium do in terms of the action potential? It hyperpolarizes. So now, if you're hyperkalemic and excess potassium, that's going to hyperpolarize those membranes. You're not going to be able to generate an action potential as well. Potassium imbalance will kill you fast. It is dangerous.
Isn't that what they put in the lethal injections?
It
Potassium
is.
shots?
It is, it's potassium and something else. They give you several different agents. But it's something like that, and that's what it does, it basically stops the heart. Okay, yeah, nasty business. Okay, so we said preload, contractility, and afterload. Afterload is the pressure in the vessels that the heart has to overcome to get the blood out. So think about isovolumetric contraction. What does the heart look like in that stage?
All the
Iso
same, so it's.
same volume, that means nothing's leaving. Tell me about the valves. They're all closed. What? Say it again. Yeah, the ventricles are full, you're right, the ventricles are full, all the valves are closed. What pressure do the ventricles have to overcome to get blood through the semilunar valves? Whatever blood is left in the aorta, whatever blood is left in the pulmonary arteries. Remember, it's a closed system. There's liquid all the way through. So the pressure exerted by that is what the ventricles have to overcome. Does that make sense? That is afterload. So if you have something like valve damage, where the valves are not as compliant, what will that do to your afterload? Increase or decrease? Increase, yeah, you're having to really push against increased resistance. What about your pulmonary emboli? Increase or decrease afterload? It'll increase. So then let's try to relate this term to one of the previous ones. What effect will an increase in afterload have on the preload? It will lower the preload because now you're having to fight to just get the blood out, much less push the rest of it through. Do you see? So then what does that do to the afterload? Now you have a reduced preload. What does that do to your output? That lowers it. So now your heart's not working efficiently at all. You see where this is going? Nowhere good, right? So they all affect each other. And then I like this as a kind of a wrap up because it shows you what affects these three things that are in turn affecting your stroke volume and your rate. All right. We made it. Now before you completely deflate, if I can get, what part of this is gonna give you the most trouble? In other words, if I gotta go through and I gotta narrate some of this for you, which parts do
Do
you
you
want?
need a chart with the angle,
The cycle?
link slide?
Yeah, the cardiac cycle.
Cardiac cycle one?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And could you also teach us how the blood goes through?
Yes. that'd
Yeah.
be-
The cardiac cycle?
Pathway of blood flow, cardiac, now I better make a note. What else?
I think you're asking this, I don't know if you're necessarily with this, but I'm still confused with the whole alpha thing.
You two,
Yeah.
like I understand it, but I can't.
So I don't.
I get it, but I can't like
Alpha, beta.
explain to you
Oh,
what's
the
going
receptors?
on. Yeah.
Wait, that's very.
I wouldn't worry too much about it. I mean, here's kind of the take home. All
You
right?
say that about everything.
Yeah, right? Alpha beta receptors are specific, they respond to a specific type of chemical. Okay, so in other words, it's like the difference between a normal door lock that a key will unlock and the stupid cyber locks that we have. They're two different chemical classes, they respond to two different things. That's all it is. That's all it is. And the only one that you really need to know is the beta receptor because it directly affects heart rate and heart function.
Can you, go, well,
Okay, so hang on, I gotta do blood flow,
the cardiac conduction system,
conduction,